After the intense first trial, Saren and her team thought they had a moment to catch their breath. But as they made their way back to the holding area, a new announcement blared over the loudspeakers. The next trial begins immediately. Prepare yourselves for the test of minds. The words echoed through the air, and Saren felt a chill run down her spine. They had survived the physical trial, but now it was time to see if they could survive a different kind of challenge, a test of intellect and strategy. The test of minds, Commander Valen repeated softly. It's a puzzle trial. I've read about these. The galaxy's most intelligent species are known to compete in them, and they're always brutal. Stay sharp. Saren nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure what to expect. After all, humanity wasn't known for mastering complex galactic puzzles. While their science and technology were rapidly advancing, they still had much to learn from the ancient civilizations of the stars. The arena transformed around them. The sky changed from a deep, starry night to a swirling mix of neon colors. Strange geometric shapes appeared in the sky, floating above the ground. In the center of the arena was a large floating hologram. The voice of the announcer boomed again. To begin, each team must solve a series of complex puzzles. You must solve them within the time limit or face elimination. The puzzles will test your logic, your ability to think under pressure, and your teamwork. You have 20 minutes. Good luck. The hologram shimmered, and the first puzzle appeared. It was a grid of symbols, lines, shapes, and patterns that seemed to shift before their eyes. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a confusing mess. There were no instructions, no hints, just the puzzle itself. Saren frowned as she studied the screen. I've never seen anything like this before. What's the key to solving it? Lieutenant Juno stepped forward, narrowing her eyes at the shifting symbols. I don't know, but we can't waste time guessing. We need to figure out a pattern. Let's divide the grid into sections and start looking for any repeating elements. The team quickly set to work. Saren and Juno focused on the left side of the puzzle, while the others studied the right. The symbols were strange, but Saren's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the patterns. After a few moments, she saw something. Wait, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Look at this. The shapes repeat every third row. It's a pattern. We just need to match the shapes in the correct order. Juno smiled. Nice catch. That gives us a starting point. They worked quickly, piecing the symbols together. But time was ticking away. The hologram displayed a countdown clock, its seconds flashing on the screen, each one a reminder of how little time they had. As the last few seconds of the puzzle ticked down, Saren's heart pounded in her chest. The final pattern was nearly complete, but they were running out of time. With a final adjustment, Saren matched the last symbol into place. Done, she shouted, just as the clock reached 0. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then, the hologram flashed, and a message appeared. Puzzle solved. The crowd in the arena erupted into applause, and Saren's team exchanged relieved glances. They had done it. But they knew that the trials were far from over. This was only the beginning. The announcer's voice returned, more urgent this time. Now the final puzzle. This will test your ability to think beyond logic. It is a test of creativity. You must create a solution to an impossible scenario. You have 10 minutes. Saren took a deep breath. The challenge was getting harder, and this one felt different. It wasn't about solving a pattern or cracking a code. This time they had to think outside the box. The scenario appeared in the hologram. It was simple. You are trapped on a deserted planet with no food, water, or tools. There are only 5 people in your team. You must find a way to survive until help arrives. What do you do? Saren stared at the display. The answer wasn't in the symbols or the logic. It was in how they could work together as a team. She glanced at the others. They all had different strengths. Juno was a survival expert, one of the best at finding resources in hostile environments. Valen was an experienced leader, always calm in the face of danger. Together they could make a plan. "All right," Saren said, stepping forward. "We know the most important thing is water. Without it, nothing else matters. Juno, you're in charge of finding any sources of water. The rest of us will focus on building shelter and keeping morale high." Juno nodded. "I agree, but we'll need to create a system to find water quickly. We can use the sun's heat to guide us to underground reservoirs." The team worked together, brainstorming ways to solve the scenario. With each new idea, they adjusted their plan, making sure every possibility was covered. Saren watched as the countdown reached 0. The puzzle dissolved into a new message: "Creative solution accepted." The crowd roared with approval, and Saren let out a sigh of relief. They had passed the most difficult mental challenge yet. But as they looked up at the next part of the arena, they knew that the trials would only get harder from here. Humanity had made its mark. But the road ahead was still uncertain. The galaxy was watching, and Saren was determined to show them that humans could think, adapt, and survive against the greatest minds in the universe. The colossal arena loomed above them, its gleaming walls stretching high into the sky. The place was nothing like Earth. There were no trees, no soft grass underfoot, and no familiar stars in the sky. This was a place where only the strongest, the smartest, and the most determined could survive. It was as if the arena itself was designed to challenge every part of a being's soul. Saren stood at the edge of the arena, looking up at the swirling colors of distant galaxies visible through transparent walls. The air was filled with the hum of energy, and the ground beneath her feet seemed alive, shifting with unseen forces. Her heart raced with anticipation, but she kept her nerves under control. This was humanity's moment, and she couldn't afford to falter now. Around her, a mix of alien species gathered in the grandstands. Some looked like towering giants, others were small and agile, while some had strange forms that seemed to shift and change with the light. Their eyes were all focused on the humans, sizing them up as potential threats, or perhaps as easy targets. The sound of the announcer's voice echoed through the arena. "Welcome, competitors, to the galactic trials." It boomed, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Prepare yourselves, for the first challenge is about to begin." Saren exchanged a quick glance with her team. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare them for what was to come. She had seen the other competitors. Alien, species that had been traveling the stars for centuries, with technology and abilities far beyond what humanity could even dream of. But she also knew something the others didn't. Humans were survivors. They didn't need advanced technology or strange powers. They had the will to keep going no matter what. The first trial was a test of physical strength and endurance. The rules were simple. Survive the assault of creatures released into the arena. The creatures were unlike anything Saren had ever seen. One was a massive beast with scales that shimmered like armor, its eyes glowing bright red as it growled in a low, menacing tone. Another creature was a snake-like being with dozens of writhing tentacles, each one tipped with razor-sharp barbs. And yet another was a massive, six-legged insect with armored wings that could slice through rock. The announcer's voice rang out again. "The challenge begins now." Before Saren could even react, the creatures were released. The arena erupted into chaos as the beasts charged toward the competitors. Some of the alien teams had already begun to fight, their advanced weaponry making quick work of the first wave of monsters. But Saren's team didn't have the luxury of powerful weapons. They had only their wits and their determination. "Stay calm," Saren shouted to her team. "Work together and we'll make it through." The humans moved quickly, using the environment to their advantage. Saren dashed to the side, her eyes scanning for a weak point in one of the beasts. A large stone pillar loomed nearby, and she realized it might be the perfect distraction. She grabbed a piece of broken debris and threw it, hitting the pillar with a loud crack. The pillar wobbled, then crashed down, blocking the path of one of the larger beasts. "Nice move," Lieutenant Juno shouted, giving Saren a thumbs up. The team was beginning to work in sync. They weren't the most powerful beings in the arena, but they were clever. They used their agility, teamwork, and quick thinking to avoid direct confrontation with the larger creatures. Instead, they set traps, leading the monsters into narrow passages where they could be outmaneuvered. Saren's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was sharp. She watched as Juno and a few others set up a barricade made of fallen debris, trapping one of the creatures. As the beast struggled against its prison, Saren took the opportunity to leap onto a nearby platform, gaining a higher vantage point. From there, she could see the entire arena and the chaos unfolding all around them. The alien competitors were struggling too, though their tactics were more aggressive. Some of them had advanced technology that gave them an advantage, but Saren noticed something. Many of the alien teams had become too focused on their weapons and powers. They didn't think ahead like humans did. While they fought, they ignored the importance of strategy. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were learning. Each monster they faced, each new challenge, taught them something valuable. Their ability to adapt was their greatest strength. By the time the trial ended, Saren's team had survived, though they were battered and exhausted. The other competitors looked at them with new eyes. No longer were they seen as weak or unprepared. The humans had shown they were more than capable of holding their own in the face of impossible odds. As they made their way to the exit of the arena, Saren glanced back at the towering structure. The first trial had been a success, but she knew that the challenges would only get harder from here. But if there was one thing she knew for sure, it was that humanity would never back down. They had proven that strength wasn't just about power. It was about the will to keep fighting, no matter the odds. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was ready to show them what they were truly capable of. The stars shimmered brightly in the endless dark sky, each one a distant promise of adventure, mystery, and challenge. For Saren, a young human chosen to represent her people, the reality of the invitation to the Galactic Federation felt surreal. Humanity had only recently made contact with the wider universe, and now they were being asked to prove their worth to a council of alien species. Earth had always been a quiet world, isolated from the stars. For centuries, humans had looked up at the night sky, wondering what lay beyond. Now, the invitation to compete in the galactic trials was more than just an honor. It was a chance to show the universe what humanity was truly made of. Saren sat quietly in the small meeting room aboard the Vanguard, the flagship of the Earth Expeditionary Force. The room was simple, designed for serious talks, yet there was an air of excitement. Around her were Earth's finest minds and most skilled soldiers, including Commander Valen, the mission leader, and Lieutenant Juno, the head of security. They were all waiting for the transmission to begin, the one that would tell them where and how the trials would take place. The voice of the Alien Council echoed through the speakers, alien but strangely clear. To the humans of Earth, it began, we extend an invitation. The galactic trials are upon you. A chance to prove your strength, your intellect, and your unity. To join the Galactic Federation, you must first prove yourselves worthy. You will face challenges unlike any you have ever known. Do you accept? The silence in the room was thick with tension. The members of the council had given no more details. No explanations of what the trials would involve or who the other competitors would be. All they knew was that humanity was being given a rare chance. A chance to enter a galactic community that spanned across the stars. I'll do it, Saren said suddenly, her voice steady and filled with determination. All eyes turned toward her. She had never been the most obvious choice for such a mission, young, untested, and with no experience beyond Earth. But there was something in her that stood out. She had a quiet confidence, a belief in humanity's strength that no one could ignore. Commander Valen raised an eyebrow, his face serious. "Are you sure about this, Saren?" he asked. "This is more than just a test of strength. It's a test of everything we are, of what humanity stands for." Saren nodded. "I'm sure, Commander. I may not know what awaits us, but I believe in humanity's ability to overcome anything. We've survived wars, diseases, and disasters. We've come so far, and I think we have what it takes to prove we belong among the stars." The rest of the room was quiet for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Finally, Lieutenant Juno spoke, her voice soft but filled with pride. "I've seen you fight, Saren. If anyone can lead us through this, it's you." The transmission ended with a promise to provide further details once they reached the trial grounds. The ship's engines roared to life, and Earth's crew set off into space, heading toward the unknown. Days later, they arrived at the location, a floating arena, in the heart of a nebula, surrounded by alien ships and strange, unfamiliar constellations. The trials were not on a peaceful planet, but in a vast, deadly arena where competitors from every corner of the galaxy had gathered. The arena stretched before Saren and her team, a massive structure made of metal and glass, gleaming under the stars. Above, countless alien species watched, their eyes glowing with curiosity and amusement. A large hologram appeared in front of Saren, displaying the rules of the trials. It was simple: survive, adapt, and win. The trials would test not just strength, but also intelligence, courage, and teamwork. One mistake could cost them everything. The message was clear: failure was not an option. Saren took a deep breath, standing tall as the weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. The future of humanity rested in her hands. She glanced at her team, each member, from the brilliant scientists to the skilled fighters, ready to face the challenges ahead. They weren't just here to survive. They were here to show the galaxy that humanity had something special. They had the heart, the mind, and the spirit to face the impossible and come out victorious. As the countdown to the first trial began, Saren couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This was it, the moment where humanity would prove to the galaxy that they were more than just a small, insignificant species. They were strong, clever, and willing to fight for their place among the stars. And with that thought, the trials began. The arena was still as silent as a tomb. After the emotional test they had just faced, Saren and her team were relieved to have the chance to catch their breath. But there was no time for rest. The trials were relentless. With each victory, the challenges became even more dangerous. Saren stood with her team in a holding area just outside the arena, waiting for the next trial to begin. The air felt thick, charged with an electric energy that hummed in their bones. She could sense it. Something was off. It wasn't the usual physical or mental challenge they had faced so far. This one felt different. It was like a storm was about to break, and they were standing right in its path. The announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeakers. "Attention, competitors! The next trial is a test of your survival instincts. You must navigate through an environment where nothing is as it seems. There will be no weapons, no help. Only your wits and your ability to adapt will allow you to survive. Good luck." The ground beneath Saren's feet began to rumble. Suddenly, the walls of the arena started to shift, folding inward, creating a labyrinth of narrow passages. The air became cooler, and the floor seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The familiar lights above flickered, and then went out entirely, plunging them into darkness. "Stay close, everyone." Saren's voice broke the silence, sharp and steady. She could hear the others moving behind her. Despite the lack of light, she could still sense the presence of her teammates, their breathing steady, but their nerves evident. She felt a tight knot of worry in her stomach, but she pushed it away. If there was one thing humans were good at, it was adapting to the unknown. "We'll have to find a way to navigate this maze," Lieutenant Juno said, her voice low but calm. "It's not the first time we've had to figure out an unfamiliar environment," Saren nodded. "Right. We stick together and stay focused." As they walked deeper into the maze, the air grew colder. They could hear soft whispers, like voices just out of reach, echoing through the walls. At first they tried to ignore the strange sounds, but soon the whispers seemed to grow louder and more insistent. Suddenly, Saren felt a strange pressure on her chest, as if something unseen was pushing against her. She gasped, but before she could say anything, it stopped. The feeling was gone as quickly as it had come, leaving her breathless and confused. "Did you feel that?" she asked, glancing back at the others. Juno looked around, eyes narrowed. "Yeah, I felt it too. It's like we're being watched. But I don't see anything." Saren's instincts flared. They weren't alone. Something was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But what? And why? As they moved deeper into the maze, they reached a wide, open space. The walls of the arena had disappeared, and before them lay an eerie landscape. It looked like a forest, but not like any forest Saren had ever seen. The trees were made of shimmering, translucent material, and their branches stretched unnaturally high into the air. The ground was soft like thick moss, and the sky above was dark and swirling, full of strange, shifting colors. In the distance, they could hear something moving, but it wasn't the sound of any creature they recognized. It was a low, rumbling noise, like something massive stirring in the distance. "What is that?" Valen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Saren replied, her eyes scanning the strange forest. "But whatever it is, we need to stay alert." They cautiously moved forward, the soft moss beneath their feet making no sound. As they passed a particularly large tree, Saren felt a sudden pressure on her arm. She yelped, pulling back, but when she looked, there was nothing there. "It's happening again," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Something is playing with our minds." Juno nodded. "We can't let it get to us. Stay calm. We need to keep moving." The rumbling sound grew louder. It was as if the earth itself was alive, shifting and groaning beneath their feet. Then, out of nowhere, a massive shadow appeared in the distance, moving swiftly toward them. Saren's heart raced as she signaled to her team. "Get ready." The shadow grew larger, taking shape as it approached. It was an enormous creature covered in scales that glowed faintly in the dark. Its eyes were bright red, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. It was like nothing Saren had ever seen before. Some kind of alien beast, but one unlike any other in the galaxy. Before anyone could react, the beast lunged forward with terrifying speed. It was fast, too fast for any of them to dodge. The ground beneath them cracked open, and the creature emerged from the darkened earth, its claws slashing through the air. Saren jumped back, narrowly avoiding its strike. "Move! Get to cover!" she shouted. The team scattered, each finding shelter behind the strange, glowing trees. The creature's eyes glowed with malice, scanning the area for any sign of movement. They could feel its gaze on them, and it made the hairs on the back of Saren's neck stand up. The creature lunged again, but this time, Saren was ready. With a quick motion, she grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it, aiming for the beast's eye. The creature shrieked in pain, momentarily distracted. That was all they needed. "Now," Valen shouted. The team rushed forward, using their agility to outmaneuver the creature. Juno and Saren worked in tandem, using their quick thinking to attack from unexpected angles. After what felt like an eternity, the beast finally retreated into the darkness, disappearing into the shadows from which it had emerged. The rumbling stopped, and the eerie forest fell silent once again. Saren stood panting, her heart racing. "That was too close," she said, her voice trembling. "But we made it. We survived." Valen nodded, his face serious. "But we can't let our guard down. There's something else in here, something more dangerous than that beast." Saren nodded in agreement. The trials were testing them in ways they hadn't expected, and the true threat was still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to strike again. Saren's heart raced as she stood at the edge of the arena. The first two trials had been physical and mental, but the third was different. She could feel the weight of it in the air, a test that would push not just her strength and intelligence, but her very spirit. This trial, they were told, was called the Trials of the Heart. The arena had shifted once again. The sky had turned dark, with streaks of glowing blue and gold light cutting through the clouds. The air smelled strange, like rain on a distant world. The floor beneath their feet had turned soft, almost like sand, but it felt oddly comforting. The announcer's voice echoed in the arena, breaking the heavy silence. The trials of the heart are not about strength or intellect. They are about emotional endurance. Each competitor will face a challenge designed to test their greatest fears, their deepest regrets, and their most painful memories. You must confront them, overcome them. Only then will you be allowed to proceed. Saren glanced at her team. The others were looking around, unease settling on their faces. None of them had expected this kind of challenge. They were used to fighting, solving puzzles, and pushing through difficult situations. But dealing with emotions, facing their fears and regrets, that was something new. Commander Valen stepped forward, his face grim. "Remember, this isn't about defeating anything physical. It's about your mind. Stay strong." Saren nodded, but inside she wasn't so sure. She had always prided herself on staying calm in tough situations, but facing her own emotions felt like something entirely different. Without warning, a dark shape began to rise from the center of the arena. It was a figure, humanoid in shape, but there was something unnatural about it. As it took form, Saren could see its face, her face twisted with a look of anger and pain. The figure spoke, its voice a twisted reflection of her own. "You think you're ready? You think you're strong enough to survive? What if you fail again? What if the people you love are the ones who pay the price?" Saren's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a trial. It was her greatest fear brought to life. She remembered the accident, the time she had failed to save someone close to her. The guilt had haunted her for years. She had never forgiven herself for not being able to do more. The figure laughed, a cruel sound. "You could have saved them, but you were too weak. You'll always be too weak to protect anyone." Saren felt a wave of panic, her chest tightening as the weight of her guilt threatened to swallow her whole. But then something shifted inside her. She wasn't the same person she had been back then. She had learned, grown, and become stronger. She had a purpose now. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for humanity, for her team, for the future. With a deep breath, Saren squared her shoulders. "I've learned from my mistakes. I'm stronger because of them, and I won't let fear control me anymore." The figure recoiled, its angry expression faltering. "You think you can escape the past? I don't need to escape it." Saren replied, "I need to accept it. We all have regrets, but we can choose to move forward." The figure's face began to distort, shifting like a reflection in water. It crumbled into nothing, disappearing with a faint whisper. The arena fell silent again, the tension lifting from Saren's chest. But she wasn't done yet. The trial of the heart was far from over. She glanced at the others. They too would have to face their own fears. She wasn't sure what they would experience, but she knew that whatever it was, they had to stay united. Saren turned to Juno, who was already staring at the ground, her fists clenched tightly. She could see the tension in her friend's posture. Juno had always been the strong one, the practical one. But what fear or regret could she be facing? Without a word, Saren walked over to her. "You're not alone in this," she said softly. Juno looked up, her face pale, but a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "I know. We'll get through this together." One by one, each member of the team faced their own trials, their own emotional challenges. Some fought against feelings of doubt, while others confronted the pain of past mistakes. But as they each overcame their own fears, they grew stronger, more confident in their resolve. The trial of the heart wasn't just about surviving, it was about learning to accept the past and use it to fuel their future. They were no longer just a group of soldiers and scientists, they were a team, bound together by shared strength and understanding. As the final echoes of the trial faded, the announcer's voice returned. "Congratulations, competitors, you have passed the trial of the heart. But remember, true strength lies not in the battles we win, but in how we rise after each fall." Saren exhaled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. They had done it. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger. But as they walked toward the next challenge, Saren couldn't shake the feeling that the trials had only just begun. Each victory would lead to a greater test, but she was ready. Together, they could face anything. The figure that had attacked them lay motionless on the floor, its once menacing form now nothing more than a broken shell. Saren's heart was still racing, her body tense, but they couldn't afford to rest. The arena had already shifted again, the walls once more changing, folding and bending in on themselves. Saren and her team stood in a circle, scanning their surroundings. The chamber they were in felt different now. The sense of danger was more palpable, the air heavy with an ominous energy. Every step seemed to echo louder than before, the sound reverberating off the walls, almost as if the arena was alive, breathing with them. "I don't like this," Juno whispered, glancing around. "It's too quiet, too still." Valen nodded, his eyes narrowing. "It's preparing us for the last test. Whatever comes next, we have to be ready. There's no turning back." They had come so far, surviving the trials they thought would break them. But Saren could feel it now. The final challenge was closing in. There was no doubt in her mind that it would be the hardest one yet. Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to tremble again, more violently than before. The ground cracked, and a deep rumble echoed through the chamber, shaking the walls. Saren gritted her teeth as she steadied herself. She felt a strange pull in the air, like the very fabric of the arena was shifting around them. "Get to cover," Valen ordered, his voice firm. The team immediately scattered, finding shelter behind the large pillars that lined the chamber. Saren crouched low, her breathing shallow, trying to listen for any movement. The rumbling grew louder, vibrating through her bones. Then, without warning, the floor split open, and a massive, shadowy shape rose from the depths below. It was a creature, unlike anything Saren had ever seen. Its body was covered in dark, leathery armor, and its glowing red eyes scanned the room, locking onto them instantly. It was at least 10 feet tall, with jagged claws and a row of spiny, sharp fins running down its back. The creature roared, a sound so deep it seemed to shake the very air around them. The force of its cry hit them like a shockwave, pushing them back against the walls. "It's huge!" Juno shouted, her voice strained. "How are we supposed to fight that thing?" Valen's face was set with determination. "We'll use everything we've learned so far. We've survived worse." Saren stood, her hand gripping the metal shard she had picked up earlier. She had no idea how they were going to take down the creature, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. The creature's red eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment it seemed to stare right into her soul. Without warning, the creature charged at them, its massive claws swiping through the air. Saren dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The ground shook as the creature's claws slammed into the pillar she had been standing behind. The stone cracked under the impact. "Move," Saren shouted, signaling to her team to scatter. "We can't let it corner us." Valen and Juno reacted quickly, using their agility to avoid the creature's attacks. Valen launched himself into the air, dodging another swipe, while Juno used her surroundings to her advantage, ducking behind the ruins of the broken pillars. Saren, keeping low to the ground, darted forward, using the distraction to get closer to the creature. She knew they couldn't defeat it with brute force alone. They had to outsmart it, just like they had outsmarted the illusions and obstacles before. "Focus on its eyes," Saren shouted. "Blind it, and we'll have a chance." The creature's massive head turned toward her, its eyes blazing with fury. It charged again, its claws slashing through the air. Saren sprinted, feeling the ground tremble beneath her feet as she closed the distance. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, explosive device they had scavenged from one of the previous trials. With quick precision, Saren hurled the device toward the creature's eyes. The explosion went off with a loud crack, and the creature roared in pain, its head jerking back as smoke billowed around it. Now was their chance. "Take it down!" Valen yelled. The team sprang into action. Juno threw a series of small bombs, timed to explode around the creature's legs, while Valen dashed in, using his strength to land a heavy blow to the creature's side. Saren, using the opening they had created, dove at the creature's other eye with a sharp metal rod, jabbing it deep into the soft tissue. The creature howled in agony, swinging its claws wildly, but the damage was done. It staggered backward, its vision impaired, disoriented by the combined attacks. Saren didn't waste a moment. She sprinted toward the creature's underbelly, aiming for its weak spot. With all her strength, she plunged the metal rod into its body, driving it deep into the creature's heart. The creature let out one last, deafening roar before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching before it went still. The chamber fell silent once again, the only sound now the team's heavy breathing as they took in the victory. "We did it," Juno said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. "We actually did it." Saren wiped the sweat from her brow and looked at her team. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. They had faced the arena's trials and survived, together. But Saren knew that the arena's challenges weren't just physical. It had tested their minds, their trust in one another, and their ability to adapt. It had pushed them to their limits, but they had proven something to themselves. "We're not done yet," Saren said, her voice steady. "This was just one trial. There's still more to come." Valen nodded. "And we'll face it together. We're stronger than we thought." As the arena shifted once more, Saren knew they had passed the hardest test yet. But she also knew that the final challenge was still ahead of them. The true test of their strength and their will to survive was just beginning. The chamber became still. The creature was gone. Only silence remained, heavy and deep. Saren stood quietly with Valen and Juno by her side. Their clothes were torn and their bodies tired, but their eyes were full of determination. A low hum filled the air. The ground began to rise beneath their feet, slowly lifting them upward. The floor turned into a platform, glowing softly. They didn't speak. They just held their breath as the platform carried them to the final part of the arena. Above them, a wide, open room revealed itself, brighter and more peaceful than the places before. It looked like a grand hall with smooth white walls, floating lights, and tall pillars made of glass. The arena was no longer trying to scare or trick them. It had changed. In the center stood a circle of alien judges, tall beings in robes, each with a different color and shape. Their faces were serious but calm. They stood silently, watching Saren and her team step forward. Then a deep voice echoed across the hall. "You have reached the end," the voice said. "Only few have ever made it here. But before you return to your world, one final test remains." The team tensed. "Another trial?" Saren stepped forward. "We're ready." One of the judges, a glowing blue being, looked down at her. "This final test is not of strength, but of spirit." Another judge spoke, her voice light and smooth like wind. "You humans are new to the galactic stage. We have seen many species with power, but we test for something more. Show us what makes your kind worthy." A small orb floated down from the ceiling and hovered in front of Saren. It pulsed gently, waiting. Saren glanced at her team, then placed her hand on the orb. Suddenly, the room faded. Everything disappeared. She stood alone, in a vision. In front of her stood the people of her home. Her mother, her brother, her neighbors. Behind them, the earth glowed blue and peaceful in the sky. The vision showed memories, her training, her failures, her victories. Then it showed her team, Juno helping her after a fall, Valen standing beside her during a storm. Then came a final image, the other teams, the ones who didn't make it. Saren saw them, not as rivals, but as beings who had also fought hard, who had their own dreams, families, fears, and that's when she understood. It wasn't about being stronger or faster. It was about compassion, about respect, about fighting not for glory, but for each other. The room returned. Saren opened her eyes. She looked straight at the judges. "We're strong," she said, "not because we win fights, but because we care. We protect each other, we learn, we fail, and we try again. That's what being human means." There was silence. Then, slowly, the judges nodded. The blue one stepped forward. "You have passed." The hall lit up brighter. A soft sound played like music from the stars. "You are the first of your kind to finish all trials." "Another," Judge said. "You will return home not only as survivors, but as messengers. The galaxy watches now." Saren turned to Valen and Juno. Relief washed over their faces. They had done it. Together. A beam of light shined down, wrapping around them. As the light lifted them from the hall, Saren smiled. Back on Earth, people looked up to the sky, unaware of what had happened far away. But soon, they would know. A message would come. Humanity had been tested, and it was ready. Saren's mind raced as she and her team made their way through the shifting maze. The illusion of safety that had settled after they escaped the strange forest faded quickly. The arena had shown them just how dangerous it could be, both physically and mentally, and they weren't about to let their guard down again. The path ahead was now a narrow, winding corridor with walls that seemed to pulse with a faint glow. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and Saren could hear her heartbeat echoing in the silence. The sense of unease that had been lingering since the beginning of the trials had grown into something more intense, something harder to shake. "This place is messing with us," Juno muttered, her voice low. "First, it plays with our eyes. Now it's messing with our heads." "I think we're past just tricks," Valen said, his face grim. "Whatever we're up against now is real, and it's not going to stop until we make it through." Saren nodded, but deep down, she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just another trial, it was testing them in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. They were being pushed to their limits, and that meant something even more dangerous was coming. Without warning, the walls of the corridor began to close in. The space shrank around them, the air growing even more oppressive. The ground trembled slightly, and a deep rumbling sound filled the silence as if the arena itself was waking up. "Move," Saren shouted, urging her team forward as the walls pressed closer. The ground beneath them buckled, forcing them to run, their footsteps echoing in the narrowing passage. Behind them, the sound of the rumbling grew louder, as if something was chasing them, but there was nothing there. Saren pushed forward, but the walls kept pressing in. The narrow space became tighter with each step, the pressure building as if the arena was determined to crush them. They had to get out. They had to survive. Then, just as the walls seemed to be on the brink of closing them in completely, the corridor opened up into a large chamber. It was vast, with a high ceiling that seemed to stretch on forever. The floor was smooth and cold, and strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the dark. "Everyone, stay close," Valen ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos they had just escaped. "We don't know what's waiting for us in here." The team moved cautiously into the chamber, their senses alert. The air was still heavy with tension, and Saren couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. There was something in the shadows, something watching them. Suddenly, a sharp, unnatural noise echoed through the chamber like a crackling static. It came from the far end of the room. A figure began to materialize in the shadows, its outline flickering like a broken hologram. "Stay alert," Saren said, her voice tight. "It's another illusion." But as the figure came into focus, it became clear that it wasn't an illusion at all. It was another competitor, but unlike anyone they had seen before. The figure was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by a dark, hooded cloak. "It's one of the other teams," Juno whispered. "But something's wrong. It doesn't look right." Saren narrowed her eyes. The figure moved toward them, slowly at first, then faster, its steps echoing off the cold stone floor. As it got closer, Saren could see the sharp outline of a weapon in its hand, something long and twisted, unlike any weapon she had seen before. The figure spoke, its voice soft, almost mechanical. "You are not welcome here." Before they could react, the figure lunged at them, its weapon swinging with deadly speed. The team scattered instinctively, diving to the sides to avoid the strike. "Take cover!" Valen shouted as he and Juno ducked behind a nearby pillar. Saren darted to the far side of the chamber, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure swung again, faster this time, forcing Saren to roll to the side. The weapon slashed through the air with a sound like tearing metal. She had no choice but to get closer, to engage the attacker head-on. With a deep breath, she sprinted forward, ducking under another swipe from the weapon. Saren grabbed a loose piece of metal from the ground, a discarded part of a broken structure, and used it to block the next strike. Sparks flew as the weapon collided with the metal, and Saren felt the shockwave run through her arms, but the figure didn't hesitate. It pressed forward, relentless, as if it was driven by something more than just a desire to win. It was determined to destroy them. "Why is it attacking us?" Saren thought aloud, her mind racing. It should be part of the trial, not... Suddenly the truth hit her. "It's not one of the other teams," she said. "It's a part of the arena. This isn't just a trial anymore, it's trying to break us." The realization came too late, as the figure came at her again, its weapon raised high. But Saren was ready this time. With a swift movement, she dodged to the side and kicked the figure's legs out from under it. It fell to the ground with a crash, its weapon skittering across the floor. The team regrouped, eyes wide with disbelief. Saren turned to Valen. "This is different. We're no longer just fighting for survival. This arena, it wants to see how far we can be pushed before we break." Valen's face was grim. "And we're not even close to the end yet." As the figure struggled to rise, the room began to shift once again, the walls closing in as the next phase of the trial began. Saren felt the weight of what they were facing. It wasn't just about physical strength or survival anymore. It was about their will to hold on, no matter what the arena threw at them. The moment the beast disappeared into the shadows, a wave of silence swept over the strange forest. Saren and her team stood frozen, their breath coming in quick bursts, their bodies tense from the close encounter. It was over, at least for now. But the sense of danger lingered in the air, thick and heavy. "We need to keep moving," Commander Valen said, his voice low but firm. "The trials aren't over yet. This place is designed to mess with our heads. We can't trust anything we see." Saren nodded, her pulse still racing. They had just survived the creature, but what else could this strange arena throw at them? Every step they took seemed to bring them deeper into unknown territory, and the air felt colder as they moved forward. Juno led the way, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a sharp intensity. "Stay sharp. We don't know what's next, but it's not going to be easy." The path they followed twisted and turned, the forest growing denser with each step. The eerie glow of the trees seemed to shift, their colors changing from pale blue to deep purple, casting strange shadows across the ground. But there was something more unsettling about this place than just the strange lights. It was the quiet. The forest was alive, but it felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "I don't like this," Saren muttered, looking around. "It's too calm." Suddenly the ground beneath their feet trembled again. But this time it wasn't the deep rumble of a creature. This time it was different, like the earth itself was shifting. "Everyone get to cover," Valen shouted. They scrambled, diving behind the nearest glowing trees, their hearts pounding in their chests. But nothing appeared. The ground stopped shaking, and the silence returned, even more oppressive than before. "We've been here before," Juno said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "This doesn't feel real. It feels like we're trapped in some kind of illusion." Saren's mind raced. Is this part of the trial? Are we supposed to figure out what's real and what's not? "I think so," Valen answered. "It's a test of perception. This place is playing tricks on us." The team stood huddled together, each of them on edge. The atmosphere felt wrong, like they were being watched from every direction. Saren's skin crawled, but she pushed the feeling down. They had to keep moving. They couldn't afford to waste time. After a few moments, the group decided to move forward, slowly and cautiously. As they walked, they began to notice something strange. The path seemed to loop back on itself. A turn here, a bend there, and they ended up right where they started, standing in front of the same glowing tree they had passed earlier. "This isn't possible," Juno said, frustration creeping into her voice. "We're walking in circles. There's no way this can be real." "I don't know," Saren replied, her mind racing. "But I'm not sure we can trust our eyes. This could be part of the trial. We might have to break the cycle somehow." They tried again, walking in the opposite direction. But after just a few steps, the forest seemed to shift around them once more. The trees bent and swayed, changing shape, their branches twisting like something alive. The path ahead grew darker, the colors of the trees deepening into black shadows. "This is insane," Valen muttered, looking around at the shifting landscape. "Nothing makes sense anymore." The team's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. They had been walking for what felt like hours, but they hadn't gone anywhere. Every time they thought they were making progress, they ended up back where they started. "This isn't real. It's all an illusion," Saren said suddenly, her voice clear as the realization hit her. "We've been tricked. The forest is just changing around us. If we keep reacting to what we see, we'll never escape." Juno's eyes widened as she understood. "We need to stop relying on our eyes. We have to trust our instincts." The group nodded, and they decided to try something different. Instead of looking at the shifting trees, they closed their eyes and focused on their surroundings. They walked slowly, listening carefully to the sounds around them. The whispers, the soft rustling of leaves, and the distant hum of energy filled the air. After several steps, they felt the ground change beneath their feet, a slight shift in the texture. The trees seemed to settle, and the eerie glow began to fade. When they opened their eyes again, they found themselves at the edge of the forest, the path ahead clear and wide. "We did it," Saren said, her voice filled with a mix of relief and triumph. "The illusion is gone. But we can't let our guard down," Valen warned, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We still don't know what's waiting for us next." The team stepped cautiously onto the next section of the arena, the feeling of being trapped now behind them. But Saren couldn't shake the sense that this trial wasn't over. They had just unlocked the first part of it. The forest had tested their perception, pushing them to question reality itself. As they moved forward, Saren's mind raced. What other illusions lay ahead, and how much further could they go before their own minds began to crack under the pressure? But one thing was certain: they had proven something important to themselves. They had learned not just to survive, but to trust their instincts, to question everything, and to rely on each other when things seemed impossible. The trials were far from over, but Saren was no longer afraid. She knew they would face whatever came next, together.